afternoon and welcome to Let's Grow Shopping. Yeah, one of the main questions in gardening is how much do I water? And so with this video I'm trying to trying to address that because there's no real easy answer. So I'm just going to give you what I do and my rules of thumb. You can see in the background, like, the best time to think about what you're doing with water is when you haven't got any. You can see which plants are really struggling and which ones are all right. And in our garden at the moment, most of the trees aren't doing too badly, but some of the flowers are really struggling, and where I'm not watering every day is really struggling. You can see in the background there that the grass is parched yellow, so we haven't had any decent rain for probably 3 weeks now, and it's been up above 25 every day. Blue skies, 25, really hot weather. I was told once that plants kind of shut down over about 26 to 28 degrees, I think it is. They just can't photosynthesize at those temperatures. So above that, they just start, they're in damage limitation. They just close down and sort of stay alive essentially. So they wilt. They're not opening their leaves up to the sun because they want to conserve as much moisture as possible. When they're all happy, obviously their leaves open up, reach for the sun, and yeah, they want more light to do more photosynthesis to produce more sugars and food. This lime tree is looking pretty good. There's no real, apart from the stink bugs, there's no real stress at the moment. And also the loquat, no real stress going on there, and there's next to no soil where I'm stood. This is on the verge at the front of our house. There's probably in about, I don't know, 10 centimeters of good soil before it gets down to clay and stones. But then the pineapple sage next door is starting to show signs of real stress, and most of the pineapple sages everywhere else in my garden are in a similar state, really wilted and starting to get crispy. So this sage, this is in great nick. Like, there's nothing wrong with this at all. This actually looks like it's loving life. So there's definitely some plants that respond to heat better than others. With things like pineapple sage, I'm not that bothered about some of them going ratty and even if they die. From the ones that survive, I can easily propagate pineapple sage throughout the garden again. I've got no worries with that. You just need a wet year and they're off and racing again. It's the trees that I mainly concentrate on. If the trees start looking tatty, then I definitely know I have to increase the watering. So as I said, we've gone about 3 weeks now with hardly any rain. There's been a few sort of showers, but nothing great. And I'm out of water in the tanks. We have about 23,000 litres of water attached to our garden taps. And they're completely empty at the moment. I'm on town water again. I tend to water when I started gardening, I searched online for ages for a sort of, I wanted it to be a science and there to be a hard and fast rule where I could say for sure how much I needed to water. And I think that's what everyone's after. And the fact is, it's just not there. It depends on so many variables, such as your soil, your climate, your aspect of your garden. There's just no one rule of how often to water and how much. And so I just came up with my own. And this is, yeah, it's a rule of thumb. So you can water more often or less often, but I've just decided arbitrarily, if it doesn't rain, 10 mils of rain in a week, I need to water the garden at least once. And so I've installed drip line in most parts of the garden. Everywhere apart from my intensive veggie beds is on a drip line system. So like the broader garden essentially. And I water that, if there's been no rain, twice a week for half an hour each circuit. I've never really worked out exactly how much water that uses. Obviously each circuit is a different size, so it's going to use different amounts of water. It gets the water straight to the roots rather than me spraying it everywhere and most of that water evaporating into the air as it's being sprayed, or it's being on the leaves and then being evaporated off the leaves. So it's a worthwhile watering, and hopefully I'm hoping it's a deep water. I've never really dug down after I've done it to find out what's actually happening. And like I said, the watering factor depends on your soil. If you've got sandy soil, the water just drips straight through it, which is a lot of my garden. But I know other people who've got clay soil, and if they probably did half an hour twice a week in clay soil, the soil would still be wet. And the water that does drip tends to spread out because it doesn't just soak in and run through, it spreads out. So you're getting a larger diameter from each dripper that's wet. So sandy soil is kind of a real problem, as is too much clay. But from a watering perspective, you just lose all your water in sandy soil. And the key to that is just adding more and more organic matter all the time. And that's what I'm constantly doing. Each circuit needs well, in my case, it needs a hose adapter on it. And then it goes into and every circuit's the same, I've got, goes into a pressure reducer. So that stops the high pressure of mains tap water from just blowing these lines apart. So it reduces the pressure down. I think mine are 100 Pascal pressure reducers, and you can get 300, I'm pretty sure. And then it goes into a filter. So any little bits of muck that are in the water get filtered out, because the drippers are tiny little holes and will block up really easily. So you need the water to be as clean as humanly possible. If it's coming out of tanks, a filter's absolute must-have. And I've just connected that up and turned it on. And apart from the few little leaks at the start, it should be dripping out of the drippers. And so there's one of them every 30 centimeters. You can see the other one in the center now. So at 2 litres an hour, so each one of them drippers is putting a litre of water just straight into the soil, and it goes straight in, so it's not evaporating too quickly. And that's the important part. You're getting it to where it's needed most at the roots. And as with most stuff these days, you can buy all sorts of tees. This is 13mm pipe, by the way. I think you can get 19 is the bigger one, but 13 generally suffices for most garden stuff. These little clips they basically ratchet over the join so it doesn't pop off, and there is a way of getting them undone. So you can easily pull them apart afterwards. Actually, I won't say it's easy, but it's possible to pull them apart afterwards and reconfigure them if you want to. I've done that. I've had to do that quite a few times. One of my common things is putting a shovel through the drip line, so you have to put in a joiner that basically patches the hole up. And so yeah, it's not difficult to do. You just need a bit of a plan about what you're doing. And just one other point about drip line that I want to illustrate is the brown pipe is where all the drippers are. So that's this stuff, and the black pipe is just joining pipe. So that's where you can use black pipe to get over a long distance to where you actually want to put the drippers. And I use the black pipe to connect all the different parts together. But with the brown drip line, it's better if you have it on its pressure compensating drip line. So what that means is all the drippers will drip at the same time when it gets to a certain pressure in the line. If you don't have the pressure compensating there, the drippers near the start of the tap, where it's higher pressure, will leak more than the drippers at the end of the circuit where the pressure is less. So you want it to be like nice even drips all the way around the pipe, and so that's what pressure compensating means. It means that all those drippers won't drip until the whole line is one pressure, and then they will all start dripping at the same time. Or they will drip evenly at the same time. And another point is you want them to be on a flat surface if you can. Like my garden is all levels, and so I've got a circuit on each vertical level. And so this very dry, parched looking bed you can see in front of you full of wilting plants, is on one level, and then I'll go back to this tap and you can see it rises up, and this circuit going that way is on a different level. And so I can turn each one of those off, so it's just one circuit at a time and they're on their own level, and that's by far the best option to do. You don't want one circuit covering both of those levels. It puts stress on the pipes for starters, but it just makes for a whole lot better system if you can manage to keep them on roughly the same level. If you're on a slope, you don't want one circuit being probably more than a meter above the tap. So you want to keep it relatively flattish along the contour rather than just going straight up a hill. And this is quite difficult to see, but you use the black pipe to put an elbow down underneath the path so that it goes underneath here, and then somewhere in the middle of this wormwood it pops back out, and the brown pipe is just there. And so yeah, you can use you don't need the drippers going underneath the path. In contrast to the simple one, this one's a bit more complicated. So you've got the garden tap. I put a Y on it so that I can permanently connect this hose to this manifold. So it's a 4-way manifold with all the drip lines coming off of it. This is in the food forest. I could do the whole lot on one circuit, or try and do the whole lot on one circuit, but the amount of holes in that circuit would be way too big for the flow to keep up with from the mains. So what you do is you split it up into different circuits, and then I can put, if I've got one that's looking really poor, I can put some on and not others, but I've never really done that. I water everything all at the same time, all the time. I don't get too technical about some plants needing more water than others. I just water everything. And just the reason there's a Y on there is because I've got that permanently connected up to the manifold, but I might want a hose, so I can attach a hose to this if I feel like it. Like occasionally when I plant a new tree and I need to water that more often just on its own, I'll plug the hose in just to keep that tree going. One of the common misunderstandings, I guess, with plant descriptions is that in Australia, like plant descriptions will say, put them in full sun. Full sun in Australia is a very different prospect to full sun in the UK, for example, where I'm from. The full sun in Australia is absolutely brutal, particularly in January and February, which we're at now. If you've ever had a trampoline for your kids, the trampoline's kind of a shade cloth. So the actual bed, the black bed of the trampoline acts like a shade cloth. And I noticed when we got one that the grass underneath grew a lot longer and quicker than the grass around the trampoline. And so I was thinking, well, you know, they say don't put plants in the shade, but the shade is obviously benefiting the grass. And so I've got the camera angled this way on purpose. You can see this enormous eucalypt in our front garden. That provides dappled shade, and that's the key, the dappled part. You don't need the full-on sun, but this dappled shade, which eucalypts are fantastic at doing, helps everything thrive that's underneath. I'm going to turn around, and if you look at this hedge, magnolias, and there's a strawberry guava in there, that's thriving. That's in the dappled shade. And obviously it depends on the species of plants, but I'm just getting a broad point across. The plants to my left are doing all right. They're in the dappled shade. Then I'll back up a bit and you look at the plants that are in the full sun and out of this dappled shade. And I'm not going to go there because my camera will just overheat in the full sun, but you can see that there's nothing there apart from that lavender and the Queensland bottle tree that is really loving life at the moment. Everything is getting parched. This is a good example of plants coping and not coping with the sun. So you can see the May bush is looking like nothing's really happened. The lemon tree isn't doing too badly. But then you go down on the ground floor and the sweet potato is looking really sad. And so that's a real common thing. Once the temperatures get over this 25, 26, 28 sort of area, plants are just shutting down and conserving what water they've got. But then when you come back at, say, I don't know, 5, 6 o'clock at night, the leaves will be loving it again. Temperatures have dropped and they'll all be up and trying to capture the last bit of sunlight they can. And so that's a real common thing, so don't get too worried about that. It just sort of breaks your heart while you're walking around the garden during the day. We'll just try and do a little pan of the veggie beds. My veggies, they're not on drip line. These are wicking beds, but I still top water. I just got sick of trying to rely on the wicking to give me a realistic amount of water. I just do it myself just so I can pay attention to things. Again, a bit of a nerd. But you can see that the veggies are doing really well. They are loving this heat. Like, there's not many of them that are wilting, like you saw with the sweet potato. The cucumbers, let me get that in. Yeah, the cucumbers are going gangbusters all over the paths. They're not going up the trellis like I have designed it to do. And you can see in the background the corn just loves this heat. Tomatoes love this heat. As long as they've got enough water, they will just lap this up the whole time. So again, certain plants just thrive on it and other plants don't. Another really good point to mention is when there's heat like this, I don't tend to weed very much. I would rather have the soil covered than not. It's far better for the plants that the soil is covered up, and try and keep the life in it rather than weed it, have blank soil, and then it just gets bone dry and hydrophobic, which means the water won't get absorbed in it. It just runs off the surface. So while it might look a bit untidy and a bit jungle, it's doing the world of good to the soil and keeping that alive. And then when it gets a bit overcast and raining again, I can do some weeding and make it look a bit tidier if that's what I really want to do. The pots are in the same boat as the veggies. I'm watering them pretty much every day, possibly every other, if it's been a bit cloudier one day than others. I try and keep the pond topped up as well. I leave the azolla on the surface of the pond so it doesn't evaporate so quickly, and it just means everything's got a drink, or like the wildlife has got a drink if it wants it. Keeping the bird bath topped up for the wildlife as well, really important. The brick bed on the drip line there, that is in full sun all day, and the nature of bricks is that they will absorb that heat during the day and release it overnight. So all day, for the whole 24-hour period, that bed is going to be pretty damn warm, which means evaporation occurs a lot quicker and it dries out a lot quicker. So anything that's raised with bricks, I tend to water more than in-ground with no bricks. The in-ground soil is far likely to keep the moisture in it than an above-ground brick bed. Yeah, tanks are a whole other sort of video on their own. There's a fantastic article by Milkwood if you're wondering about which kind of tank to get. We got stainless steel, as you can see. Stainless is recyclable for the life of it. Even if it gets a leak, the tank itself, the metal, is recyclable. And yeah, Milkwood wrote a great article on a comparison between plastic, corrugated iron I think it was, and stainless steel. And so you can come to I read that and came to my own conclusions about which one to buy. Stainless steel is more expensive, but yeah, the recycleness of it struck a chord with me. The one thing that didn't strike a chord with me is the amount of silicon they have to use on the inside. Yeah, on the other side of those nuts, on the inside is a whole lump of silicon, which I'm not sure is BPA free. So it's about 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. all you can really do is make your own decision and be happy with it, I guess. You know, do your research and come to a decision that you're happy with. When you've got them, you start watching the rain a lot more and how much they fill up. And it takes about, I think it's about 70 mil of rain for these to fill up, all of them. And weirdly enough, they fill up at roughly the same rate. One nifty little thing that I did, and this is the back of the house, is I made a small amendment to the copper water pipes. So this is the town water that comes from the front of the house through this wall, about 11 meters that way, comes directly through, goes off to the bathroom and the kitchen where needed, and the laundry, and then comes out the back. And where it comes out the back, I put this on. That means that nowhere in the garden, when I turn a tap, will water come out. So I can turn the water off to the whole garden. That means I can cut into these pipes round the garden without messing with the house water. And so I can leave it turned on for the house, but the garden I can mess about with. And that has saved my life. If I've got a problem or a leak in the garden, I just turn that off and play with it. I don't have to stress about the house not having water and the kids not having a shower and drinking water and you name it. Really handy thing to do. And this is the situation underneath the outdoor sink. The copper comes in from this direction, from under the house. The T-junction goes to the sink. So this silver is just a coal to the sink. But then you can get fittings that go from copper to this HDPE pipe. And once you've got into this HDPE pipe, it's very easy to extend, and quite cheap, to extend your pipes wherever you want them in the garden. I would just heavily recommend doing it before you make your paths and walls, so you know where the pipes are going before you put permanent infrastructure in. And so you can see that pipe coming out of this here just to go through under a path. And whilst the pipe itself, this is 20 mil, you can get 25, 30, 40 and 50. You generally around the garden only need 20 and 25. Whilst the pipe is relatively cheap, it's the fittings that are a bit more expensive. So you need to plan what you're doing, not just going buying fittings. And then you can chuck any old garden tap on the, well, not any old garden tap, you can throw garden taps. You've got a fitting to screw the garden tap straight into, and Bob's your uncle. And so that's mains rated. And the fittings are extremely easy to put on. I don't want to do any plumbers out of business or do anything too risky, but they are super easy to make watertight. And whilst it may seem I have everything together, there's still hoses all over the place, like any normal garden. Yeah, as I've mentioned before, I'm from the UK, so coming to Australia with all the sun was heaven for me. I loved it. Now I'm into plants. A little sort of known aspect of it to me was the sort of anguish you have of watching your plants try and suffer through this kind of weather. After a couple of years you realise that they do bounce back. It's important not to get carried away and water all the time because they're looking overstretched. They do actually bounce back and look great. I mean, it'll only take sort of 10 mils of rain and a couple of overcast days and everything will be happy again. And to finish with, I'd just like to say a little bit about where I'm at now with all this. When I started off, the garden was growing and growing and growing, and it was turning into maybe 2 or 3 hour job watering the garden. And whilst I was paying a lot of attention to the garden while I was doing that with a hose, it was annoying to say the least. And in weeks like this, and you're having to water every sort of 3rd or 4th day, real chore. And so I went down the whole drip line path, tanks, to sort of reduce that. I always had in mind that I'd do tanks. Drip line was a bit of a harder decision to make, but the time that it was taking me to water the place, I just thought, yeah, why not? So we all want to be water wise in the garden, but I'm starting to realise and appreciate that there's a whole lot of other stuff that we're doing in the garden, like just basically consuming other products to make water wise a possibility, when really what we should be doing is only growing the things that are happy with that amount of water, and that we're happy with. I hope you enjoyed the video today. Thank you for watching.